Welcome back to the Opposition podcast at our new regular time of 7 p.m. 7
p.m. Australian Eastern Time. So if you're watching from around the world, it's Australian time,
Mate,
7 p.m.
7 p.m. You work it out. 7 p.m. Rukshan, episode 8. We've survived 8 weeks together.
I can't believe it. It's been 8 weeks. And I've actually finally changed the music because everyone's been complaining. Mainly Avi's been complaining, so I've changed the music to something a bit more upbeat. I hope you guys enjoyed that.
I enjoyed it.
If you don't like it, just let me know in the comments. That was good.
Benji didn't like it, but I thought it was quite good. So today we've got a special guest.
It's always a special guest.
But you got to act like it's more special than last week.
Yeah, that's true. So we do have a special guest today, guys. But before I introduce the guest, as always, if you want to make any comments, just put a Q at the start and a question mark. So Q, question mark, and then ask your questions just so we can filter through that. If you're wondering why you can't see people commenting, this is actually being simulcast to multiple platforms. So it's on multiple Facebooks, multiple YouTubes. Rumble today's
Rumble for the first time.
So
welcome to the viewers on Rumble. We love you, but your comments I don't think get through.
Yeah, your comments we can't actually see on our platform end. It's not technically being censored, but we're ignoring your comments for today.
We'll figure it out, but we can see there's actually an audience growing on Rumble. We thought we'll test it. We'll give Rumble a go.
That's it, yeah. The alternative technology, alternative platforms, that's the future of
I reckon
these things. So it's good, stuff YouTube, the censorship hell that YouTube is.
We love you, YouTube. Don't ban us.
But look, guys, today's guest, if you're from Victoria, you would know this person. It's someone that's been on the front lines over the last few years in terms of turning up and advocating for the people of Victoria. It's also someone that has run for office for our federal and state elections. So far unsuccessful, but the fight continues. And, this is someone that Avi and myself have also known. Avi, I think, a bit longer than myself.
Oh, actually, no one. We were just talking about it before. I've known him since I was a kid. So I've just destroyed his entire reputation walking into this.
So, it's a very dubious character I'm about to introduce just based on that. But look, it's none other than Morgan C. Jonas. Morgan, welcome to the Opposition podcast.
Awesome, Rukshan, Avi. It's great to be here. And yeah, you're right. Avi and I, we've known each other for, I guess, probably over 20 years, revealing our age here. In fact, I think we're all 38. Are we all 38? That's a conspiracy.
None of us are 38.
No, I'm in my 20s at least.
But yeah, I remember the first time I met Avi, it was in Caulfield Park, and
Did I rob you?
There were a bunch of people celebrating and Avi being marched out in handcuffs. And what was going on back then?
It was probably just another Sunday afternoon. You can read about it all in my book, Rebel from the Start.
There you go. That's a little teaser for you guys.
Now, guys, if you want to catch up to this show as well, the Opposition.show, you can see all 8 episodes, although I think our episodes have been getting better, Morgan. So based on that theory, this is going to be our best show.
No pressure, right?
How does it feel to be part of our best show?
Well, no pressure at all. I mean, it's lovely to be here. I see that the decorations are beautiful. Whose idea were the decorations?
This is all my work.
Yeah,
all the creative stuff, all the technical stuff, all the research, pretty much everything for this show is done by me. And Avi just comes in here and complains. That's the honest truth. And I know a lot of people watching at home would definitely believe this if they know Avi. Even without reading the book, you would know that this is most likely happening.
Avi turns up, he drops bombs, he leaves.
That's it. Gotcha. He just causes trouble and go.
Typical Israeli.
Wait, don't say bomb, right?
So, Morgan, what have you been up to?
I've been working, so this year's been a little bit different. Obviously, over the past few years, there's been a lot going on. You've seen absolutely everything. Rukshan, you've seen it as well. From the protests to running my show, I conducted 200 episodes of my live show, MCJReport. The bulk of them were done during 2021, and then 2022 was all campaigning. This year's been a little bit quiet. I started a business, so
What's the business?
Landscaping, gardening, maintenance, and tree services. Believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of people might be surprised to hear that I'm all right with the tools and I can get the job done. So I've been working away. I wouldn't go that far. I'd say maintenance services, tree services, things like that.
What's tree services?
So maintaining, removing branches, getting limbs out of the way, removing problematic branches, say from heights near power lines. We
may need to talk offline. Rhonda keeps getting me into trouble for my lack of tree servicing.
So obviously I'm still serving as the president of Freedom Party of Victoria, and it's a party I founded, and we're ticking along here. It's been a little bit of a quiet year, but we've got a candidate running for the district of Warrandyte, Greg Cheeseman. So
that's the by-election, right?
Yeah, that's a by-election. Yeah.
When is that?
That's later this month, 28th. Yeah. So we've been getting him ready for that, and Greg's doing a great job, and we're just going to keep ticking along because, for me, this has always been a long-term vision, getting started. I mean, you remember, Avi, when I got politically active, when I took an interest in public affairs, it wasn't during COVID, it was quite a few years ago, and
Before it was cool.
I see a little cheeky smile on your face. I'm not sure what's going on
How
there,
we've grown since then, eh?
It's been a wild journey.
It has.
It's been a wild journey. So that's for anyone interested, that's what I've been up to, broadcasting less, but not going anywhere. I'm in the fight. This is like a long-term vision for me. So, yeah.
What are the takeaways for you from, obviously, you've tried federal election, state elections, and you've built up the Freedom Party. What are the takeaways from being in that process in Victoria? And I guess, Daniel Andrews has obviously won and come back in, and we have this very weak Liberal opposition. And Victoria's finding out very quickly, since Daniel Andrews has won this election, that a lot of the promises that he's made, he's not really keeping. What's the takeaways from you as someone who's in this space?
Okay, so the takeaways from me, it's really all about the numbers. So I'm just going to lay it all out on the table for everybody listening at home, and that is that when we look at the Victorians who voted for, let's just say, a freedom-orientated party or a conservative-orientated party, one of the minor parties, we're actually talking about just over 14% of the primary vote in the upper house. All right, so put that in perspective, a quota is 16%. So what that demonstrates is that there were over 500,000 Victorians who decided to ditch Labor and Liberal and to vote for a minor party. And, unfortunately, the results don't reflect that. There are a lot of lessons to be learned, I think, from everyone's front. And, I'm definitely not here to point the finger at anyone at all. I think a lot of people have been through reflection. But the major takeaway is that we have numbers to make a monumental political shift in Victoria and the rest of the country, and figures are pretty similar from state to state and territory to territory. And what we really require is a formalised coalition of these small parties with probably legally binding contractual arrangements between these parties in order to capture that primary vote. Because if we're able to do that, then all of a sudden we're looking at a political force that's more powerful than the Greens. And, that's a force that nobody can stop. So that is the biggest takeaway. And, I'll put it all out on this podcast right now that I'm willing to venture through the depths of hell to contribute towards that happening. And
but if you had to point fingers, I'm just
well, we might as well point some fingers. Why
point
not?
Some fingers. Come on, this is the opposition dot podcast.
Yeah. Anyone who's followed me for the past few years knows that I've been in a few dogfights, and but really where I'm at right now is that this is
grown
a brand
past the dogfight.
Yeah, well, until the next dogfight, but right now basically this is a new time, this is a new era, and I really think that we need a new perspective. And Craig Kelly has some thoughts on this as well. He'll be speaking at my show tomorrow night along with you guys.
I was about to say, speaking of dogfights, I found it interesting that UAP, so Craig Kelly and Babette are going to be at your event tomorrow night. We're going to talk about your event anyways, but tell people the event quickly so they know what we're talking about.
Well, I think there might be like 10 tickets available online, MCJReport.com. So the event's pretty much sold out. We're doing MCJ Report 200 tomorrow night in Rowville. Doors open at 7 o'clock. And this is...
I heard you have top security.
Oh, we've got...
Daniel.
Bloody good security. We've got Daniel and we've got some others as well. So...
Very exciting.
If there's any trolls out there that find out the address and want to show up, I can guarantee it's not going to be a good night for them. But... So what was the question? What's happening tomorrow night? Craig Kelly, Ralph Babbitt.
So you've got your 200th show. Yeah. Ralph Babbitt and Craig Kelly are coming to your show.
Yeah.
UAP. And if I recall, one of those dogfights was with them, wasn't it?
No, I never had a dogfight with Ralph Babbitt or Craig Kelly. It was
the UAP.
Probably UAP, and there was a bit of a spat between myself and Clive. But as far as I'm concerned, like to me, that's water under the bridge now, and that was
to them.
That was really 2022. Well, I had a good conversation with Craig over the phone the other day. I've had good conversations with Ralph. I think they're both great guys. Craig Kelly's the first guy that stood up in Parliament and put his neck on the line. And even when, ScoMo told him, either shut your mouth or lose your job, Craig kept speaking up. and Ralph is doing a phenomenal job. I think that we can all agree that he's representing us really well in there. And yeah, I mean, look, obviously there were a few, small things that happened between, back then, but to me that's in the past now. I'm looking forward. I don't even want to go there because to me that's in the past.
Do you think though? Have you personally? I know my experience through this journey, and we're talking about. I've known you for years, but politically active. You were there back in the beginning, and I look back and I cringe at some of my actions from the beginning. But more importantly, I think I've learnt many lessons, and I think one of the lessons I learnt early was not to have those public spats because they never end well for anyone. Is that something you learned?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's also times where they can't be avoided, and let's just say.
What are those times?
Well, let's just say, for instance, I'm in a public talk or I'm on a panel and somebody has a direct dig at me personally. I'm gonna bite back. And to me that's a challenge.
But I don't think we're talking about that. I think what we're talking about is where there's shots fired from the safety of a studio or behind a camera
or a press conference
or a press conference. So it's a bit different. Obviously, if you're on a panel, especially when it's a debate or something, that's fine. But
I think I know what you're saying. I think I do think it's quite nuanced. I think that in most instances, heated arguments. Especially people who say have a crossover of your political views, they should probably be sorted out over a conference table behind closed doors, or on a podcast. Yeah. And if need be, then you can go out the back of the building and sort it out, and then come out shaking hands and hopefully reaching a resolution after having a heated argument. So I would say, when possible, you should definitely avoid it. Sometimes it's not avoidable. Every situation is different, and but yeah, I would say if you can avoid it, but
Is that something you learned? That's, I guess, my question. Did you learn that from the experience of doing it, or was that something you've always tried to practice?
I've definitely reflected on it. I've definitely reflected on it, and I would say that I've learned a lot throughout this whole process. About myself, what ticks me, when I need
What are those?
Well, when I need to fire more, when I need to hold back.
What ticks you?
What ticks me off? I mean, how long's a piece of string, Sometimes trolls tick me off. Sometimes trolls tick me off. I need to stop getting pissed off.
Not much. I'm
that.
pretty calm. I don't get ticked off by much. I'm pretty calm.
I try pretty hard.
Yeah, I just don't care. Like, there's so much more to life than caring about a lot of these things. I just don't care. I just don't engage in a lot of things.
You know what? That is actually one of the amazing, and I'm going to say something nice about Rukshan. I don't often say that, but that's one of the amazing characteristics of Rukshan is the fact I look at him and he people say they don't care. Rukshan doesn't give a shit.
I love the trolls.
He loves them.
I love them. I love them so much. I just laugh and I just enjoy. I look up their comments all the time. I've even hung some up in my house.
Oh, he sends me all.
That's just sort of creepy, but
he sends. We have a WhatsApp group between me, Rukshan, and both our wives, and Rukshan's always finding the most hateful messages about me, and he shares it in the group, and we all laugh. Most of them consist of chopping boards.
But aren't they sort of like recycled by now? Like,
it's more, but it's
like there's basically like five main ones. There's the chopping board. There's you're a child murderer. There's
but Rukshan really finds them.
Yeah, I look for them.
I search for ones against Rukshan, but Rukshan is actually most people like him, even his haters. That they find it hard. They don't have much on him.
Well, what people don't like about me the most is that I hang out with Harvey Yemini.
Yeah, it's so true.
That's my biggest problem in life. That this person next to me.
That's where you went wrong.
But look, anyway, before we get go off track too much, Benji, if you pull up the share screen. Speaking of Daniel Andrews, obviously we've had this debacle with the Commonwealth Games. That's going to cost us maybe $1 billion, maybe more. And now they're having an inquiry that's going to, waste our politicians' time as well. We have this possible thing where they've reneged on building some train lines in some of the suburbs. And then we also have, Daniel Andrews making these secret deals with Aboriginal groups that are not technically secret, but these are things that are happening behind the scenes that we're finding out about now. This Daniel Andrews in our state of Victoria.
You didn't even mention the gas and the cutting of gas.
The cutting of the gas. I mean, that's something we've discussed before, that gas is being cut in Victoria and we all have to go electric in new houses for now. But I wouldn't be surprised if they bring on some property tax for dwellings that already have gas in the future to raise revenue. Daniel Andrews seems to keep screwing over the people of Victoria. and people just seem to keep copying it. We get these chances at these elections, and he's not voted out. His party maintains power, sometimes even building a lead in some instances. What's the trick to defeating Daniel Andrews, or is this a case of a guy that will just never be defeated? He'll just walk off and into the sunset, and we will be left with his debt and his mess, wondering how did we ever end up in this situation?
Now, when you say defeated, are you talking about politically or something else?
Politically.
Okay.
Politically.
Just that's a great question.
Because you confronted him once, didn't you, during the election time? Was that you? Or?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got tipped off. A friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, Daniel Andrews in Frankston. He's visiting an Aboriginal health clinic." And I just waited on the park bench out the front of the building. He came out. He had like a couple of bodyguards, and I just talked a bit of smack to him, and he did the chicken dance. He got pretty nervous actually. So he's not that tough.
He doesn't like to be in public, does he? I mean, out of a lot of the leaders around in Australia, at least, he does very limited public appearances where it's not controlled.
Yeah, because he values his safety, I guess. There's a lot of people out there that don't like him, and that it just takes one person to make a move at a certain time. But going back to your question in regards to how to defeat this guy, well, I spent a lot of time in the district of Mulgrave during the state election, and I did make several observations from my time there. The first was the ballot draw, which was electronic, of course, whereby the ordering of the ballot was exactly in line with the preferences as printed on the Labor how to vote cards for the district of Mulgrave, minus one position, with Daniel Andrews first and our candidate Aiden McClendon dead last. And, I'm not calling conspiracy, I'm not saying the machines are rigged, I'm not saying anything like that. But
please don't, because we want this.
I know. I'm not saying that. All I'm
Dear AEC, we are not saying
we're not saying that.
We're not saying anything about Dominion. Nothing about Dominion.
But I did contact a friend of mine who's a statistician. I said, what are the chances of this happening? He said, probably like 1 billion to 1. And I'm like, these things do happen. Sometimes, you have like a 1 in a billion sort of life event. And anyway, moving on from that.
What was the previous one? Did you look back at the previous election?
For Mulgrave?
Yeah, to see
the ballot draw. No, I didn't.
It'd be interesting.
It would be interesting to see that. But yeah, I could just tell at the polling booths, Mulgrave being a very multi-ethnic sort of district, there was a lot of support for Labor. Lots of people walking into the polling booths, face mask on, don't give me a how to vote card, I'm voting for Labor. And what I think is a pretty common tactic, not just with the Daniel Andrews Labor government, but governments all around the world, is they'll ramp up spending on community groups and community centres leading up to elections, effectively buying votes in preparation for the election, even though that would not technically be considered campaign funding. So I just think that over the past 20 years, Daniel Andrews has done such a big job stitching up the district of Mulgrave with grants and appearances and handouts that he's just conditioned these communities into voting for Labor. On top of that, these communities, and God bless them, I'm not knocking them at all, they a lot of the migrants moved to Australia under Labor policies, and I think it's just one of those typical situations where you vote for what your parents voted for.
Yeah.
You don't particularly take an interest in politics. Red team, blue team. Well, I've always voted red, so I'm going to do that. I don't think there's anything more than that. I'm not saying that it's fair, but I do believe that's what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, I know Daniel Andrews because in terms of my parents are in Dandenong, so similar area to Mulgrave.
Yeah.
And they voted Labor for most of their life. And that's just because they were just used to doing that because they felt like they owed Labor a debt due to their immigration policies and so forth. So they've always done that. But Daniel Andrews actually goes to like the Sri Lankan New Year's festival. He goes to all the Hindu temples. He goes to the Sikh temples. He dresses up. He gets what do you call that when they put the flowers on him and stuff? He participates in all those things.
He puts the kippah on his head and goes to synagogue.
Yeah, this guy is a man of every religion, everything. Anything for votes. I reckon.
A man
Daniel
of the
Andrews.
people, right?
Yeah, and the people are fully like they're fully hoodwinked by it. Like they think he like loves them and he's all for them. And I think he's really good at playing the politician in terms of the fake politician. Like the man of the people. He's good at portraying that in these communities. Whereas, unfortunately, the opposition and so forth, they come across as even more fake than him. I don't know how you do that, but that's even more try.
I think that's what it comes down to, and that's the thing. It's that old, I think this last election, it wasn't necessarily that people were voting for Daniel Andrews. I think a lot of people were angry, but they just weren't voting. There was no opposition. So
Senator Babette's actually coming onto our comments. I just pulled up his comment. He wants us to come to Canberra and do a podcast from his office. So just wanted to bring that comment up.
what? Like, that's called trolling. Why is Senator Babette spending our taxpayer dollars?
That's right.
To troll us on what platform's he on?
He's probably on YouTube.
Call him out.
How do you know that's actually Ralph?
That's true, actually. That's true. It could be anyone. No,
it sounds like him because it's what he mentioned to us.
It looks like a comment that Ralph would make, actually.
It is.
I just wanted to bring that up.
Boys, pack the
bags.
bags.
But keeping on the theme of elections, I've got this story. If you bring up the screen, Benji, this is touching on the AEC again and around this court case they had with Craig Kelly about the font size in his political advertisements that were in front of the voting booths, the polling areas, whatever. Why is it that the AEC specifically targets these type of minor parties, particularly the UAP in this instance, over something like font size? And they've lost this now. They've been defeated in the court. And it's going to cost taxpayers at least $1 million over this very frivolous case that they've brought against Craig Kelly in this instance. But we have all these other political ads from Labour Party, Liberal, whatever. Sometimes they don't even have the authorization message at all on the posters, but the AEC don't go after them. Do you think in our country where we have these electoral bodies like the AEC and the VEC that are somewhat captured by these kind of more left-wing political... The Uni Party, for instance, let's say Labour and Liberal, they're captured by those groups and they don't give the minor parties a fair go? Because this looks like very targeted, the way they went after Craig Kelly over this particular issue.
Yeah, I would say that it's targeted for sure, and that, you know, whether it's the AEC, the VEC, bureaucracies, institutions, so many are completely compromised by hard left-wing influences in our country. And, you know, you have to think that we've never seen such an aggressive attempt to take down a candidate as what we saw with Craig Kelly over, allegedly a font size that was thrown out in the end.
Because they took him to court or whatever the night before the actual polling.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. So, me personally, I'm really not one for coincidences. I think that Craig Kelly challenged the entire political system in this country when he could have kept his mouth quiet and kept a job and kept the seat of Hughes for as long as he wanted. But instead, he was blowing the whistle on COVID-19. And don't worry, I'm not going to say something that's going to get your podcast taken down. I can see what Avi is thinking. Let's just say that he stood up when it was very unpopular to do so. And that's the definition of leadership and free thinking, because Craig paved the way to give other people the confidence to do so. He posed a massive threat to the system, and I have to think that, you know, he would have made some powerful people pretty angry along the way.
Yep.
And, you know, just like both of you have probably made some powerful people angry, and that's the price you pay.
No one even knows who Rukshan is.
That's the price you pay when you stand up and you're bold.
The system's fighting back pretty much.
Yeah.
That's why they do it.
It has to be. What else explains it, to be fair?
Yeah.
Over font size. I mean, such a weird thing to waste $1 million fighting a frivolous thing of taxpayer funds.
Font size, yeah.
Over font size that, you know, how do you make that distinction of what's legible, what's not legible, and why just the UAP and Craig Kelly?
The real problem is that Craig Kelly was not raised by a single mum in commission housing.
That's true.
That's why.
Then you can do whatever font size.
Would that help him?
Albo. Didn't you know that about Albo?
We'll keep moving on. Benji, if you pull up the screen,
Who's
Benji.
that? I don't know.
This is a story that caught my eye this morning, which was speaking of Daniel Andrews and these kind of leaders. So Daniel Andrews is a dictator that we know. But across in Canada, there's an even bigger dictator, I think, in many ways.
I don't know if he's a bigger dictator. I think
they're
they're very similar, but he's just prime minister.
It's just a bit different.
I find this very interesting. You know why?
Yeah.
You know, this is someone's private life, whatever.
Yeah.
But to me, the weird thing here, and I wonder how many times it's happened in history, where the prime minister of a country, their wife leaves them or they separate while he's prime minister. It's fair to say she's probably leaving him, because I doubt during his leadership he would leave his wife. But whatever, it's amicable apparently, or whatever.
Yeah, they've signed an agreement and they've put out a statement to get the joint statement and so on.
Yeah, even his wife doesn't like him anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
he's become so unpopular. His own wife is walking out on him. I wonder when Dan Andrews, what's her name? his name, her
It's like Karen or something, right?
Karen Andrews. No,
When's Karen
No, it's
Andrews?
not Karen. It's not.
Catherine.
Catherine.
Right.
When's Catherine Andrews, the alleged driver of that night, when's she going to leave? Dad?
The sad thing about all of this, I think, is the Canadian people can't separate from him. As easily. I'm sure they'd pay. They'd be happy to pay a settlement to separate from this guy.
no recall elections.
No recalls. Yeah.
I mean, it's a great question. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was governor of California, and he had at least one love child, I think, to a maid, and even Arnold and his wife at the time sort of kept it under wraps until his tenure was finished, and then the marriage was over.
Yeah.
Afterwards,
I really wonder how many times this has happened. It's someone's private affairs, which is fine, but in the context of history, I just don't know.
Look, I mean, it's a private affair, but look at guys like Trudeau, Andrews. How many marriages do you think they've destroyed with their policies over the last couple of years? I mean, they would be
COVID policies.
They would be responsible for the destruction of so many marriages just during that time. I mean, I'm just saying, just based on their policies, and they didn't care. They didn't care. I think we don't need to go into their private lives, but it's okay, I think, to criticize them even on these things. I don't really care.
Yeah,
You're
I mean,
heartless.
maybe
I'm
there's.
heartless.
I mean, you don't know. I mean, there could be a multitude of reasons for their separation, but
Maybe she found out.
Well,
Castro.
well, it's either the Castro or Trudeau makes quite a few. For the sake of your podcast, interesting statements and supports some pretty interesting lifestyles of other people, and maybe she just sat down one day and said, what, this is just all too much. It's getting too weird, and I'm done. Or maybe he left her. We don't know,
Maybe
but it's
she
their private life.
subscribed to
I guess
Rebel
I don't really
News.
care.
Maybe she subscribed to Rebel News in Canada. You know
like
how
to
much
think.
he hates Rebel.
I thought he loved Rebel.
Yeah, no, I think it's a love-hate relationship.
I thought he was like a massive Avi Yemini fan, right?
No, he's literally taken. Rebels had to take him to court because they kicked him out. He banned Rebel from covering. I think
a couple of years ago now, 2-3 years ago.
Twice 2 years in a row. I think it was last year from the debate or whatever, and Rebel actually won. And then they had journalists, like colleagues of mine, ask him questions, and then he goes on this whole rant about Rebel. So what I reckon happened,
someone brought up a great comment about what happened to Bill Clinton during his time as president of the US, and even then the marriage didn't fall apart.
Oh yeah, true.
You know what I mean? It was just some crazy stuff.
What did Trudeau do?
What did Trudeau do? That is some hardcore
She
stuff.
subscribed to Rebel. I'm gonna say, sources have told us.
Maybe she's a vaccine skeptic and she just couldn't handle his policies.
But
maybe she didn't want another booster.
Who knows?
And Pfizer broke off the relationship. All right,
Could theorize. It's like we're playing poker with the cards down.
We are really risking this entire podcast.
Let's leave it now. Speaking of dictators, Benji, if you bring up the screen, Morgan, one of the areas of interest that you have had for a long time is around China and Australian-Chinese relationships, China relationships. What's the situation at the moment? I know in Australia we've had all these military operations happening in terms of exercises between the US and other allies, and a lot of it has to do with what's happening in the Pacific. China's really kind of bringing their tentacles into the Pacific, whether it's with the smaller island nations that surround our country. They're trying to exert their influence. And we're also seeing China, the relationship with the US is a bit sketchy. And of course, we have the issue with Taiwan. Where does Australia sit with all of these things that are happening from what you've seen over the last a few years that you've been closely monitoring this?
Right. Well, I don't think Australia has any choice but to really further solidify our strategic and military partnerships with the United States. Of course, Australia being a trading nation, we depend on the United States to secure our commercial shipping vessels, our exports all around the world. We're an export nation, for better or worse. We're very dependent on just a handful of industries, namely mining. And yeah, of course, should China continue to exert its influence throughout the South China Sea and Japan and Senkaku Islands and Taiwan, there's going to be potential problems for the functioning of the Australian economy. And if the viewers think like me and tend to think that a lot of the time war is mostly about economics and finances, I think that Australia will really have no choice at the end of the day if push comes to shove in the regions around China that we just mentioned, but to get involved and to probably put boots on the ground. And China believes that this century belongs to China. The Chinese government has put forward a very, very strong notion of national thinking, of, I guess, embarrassment over what happened to China in the past, and they're not seeking to be what they would refer to as embarrassed anymore by Western powers. And we see the emergence of probably the biggest military in the world, with Chinese students as young as 5 years old throughout schools in China learning real military drills. And they're looking very fierce, and their training looks to be very very strong.
Yeah, because they're switched on, right? The kids in China are switched on.
Yeah, but what are you worried about? They haven't learnt about gender fluidity and
that's right.
All the real stuff that's going to save the world.
Yeah.
Well, that's climate change. They don't learn about. They don't learn about the global. What do they call it today? Global boiling.
Yeah, they're not learning about global boiling.
No. So they're doomed.
Well,
I don't think we can sit back and watch them destroy themselves without knowing about the gender issues in society, without knowing that they're boiling, and they're probably not getting enough boosters. So I don't know what you're so afraid of.
Yeah.
Well, we're preparing the next generation.
So you're excited about these changing global dynamics. Like, what exactly excites you about it, though? That's what I'm trying to work out. Like, I'm trying to get into the brain of Avi right now.
All I'm saying is our next generation, I have faith in them. They know that if China comes, let's say China wants to fight man to man, all we got to do is all identify as women. Our next generation is prepared.
That's right.
They're going to, I mean, that's funny, but the truth is, if you, all right, people might not like me for saying this, but if you go to China and you pick out 1,000 random high school students and you set them against 1,000 random Australian high school students in just a crazy all-out brawl, I'd say at this stage the Chinese students would win, despite probably being a bit smaller in stature, but with the training that they're receiving right now, honestly, I don't think that we'd stand a chance. So. Yeah, you guys know where I stand. We need to get rid of all the woke agendas, and we need to be strong again.
It's not just the training; it's also the mindset. I mean, these
very
are
nationalistic.
These are people who are proud of their country, right? They're patriotic. They believe in their country.
That's true.
And we're living in a country right now where we're told that we can't even identify as Australians without accepting all sorts of flaws about us. And generally, Asian countries, China has a classic example. They're not being raised like that. The children, they're being raised to love their country and protect their country, protect their flag. I think we're at a great disadvantage in that type of situation.
Well, absolutely. And nationalism is a pretty normal part of the education in China. And as you said, they're taught to love their country, to respect their land, and to believe that they are from the greatest country on earth. Now, I wish that we had some of those notions more consistent in our education system about Australia. But you're right. I mean, you think about the Vietnam War, the soldiers in the North were getting tattooed, born in the North to die in the South. And I'd say there's a very similar mindset now permeating throughout the education system in China.
Yeah, it's a situation that, hopefully doesn't escalate to those levels where we're actually faced with such a situation.
But you think if we put 1,000 of them on I think we need to try this.
Well, Rebel News
You
sponsor.
just made up some scenario which I'm like,
why don't we just do Benji and you? Benji, you're from Hong Kong.
Up.
He's from Hong Kong, so it's pretty much
Hong Kongers know how to fight. They put up
China.
the best protest. You were there covering the Hong Kong protest.
I know Hong Kong. Yeah, back then I had faith. Look, let's be realistic. Hong Kong has fallen.
Unfortunately, so
I think that then putting Benji against me is probably a fair example, but I don't want to do it because Benji will probably beat me. I seen him in the protest. We've got to find that footage. Remember that time, Benji? We were at a protest and Benji's filming, and like the senior commander or whatever he was, knocked Benji's 360, and Benji lost it. Turned to fight him. I'm like, dude, Benji, calm down. We need to get the footage. He wanted to go full CCP on
He was
them.
almost activated CCP full activation.
He's a sleeper cell in Rebel News.
That's it. So moving on, Benji, if you pull up the screen for me. Look, I hate coming back to COVID, but this story, it doesn't go away because we're still dealing with the impacts of this. And the impacts of this that we're dealing with now are even more horrific because we're seeing more and more people being still denied access to healthcare based on their vaccination status. In this particular case, Avi, this is a teen that's having trouble getting a lung transplant because they're not vaccinated. That's correct? This is on...
Yeah, from what I understand, yeah. I didn't write this story.
No, but...
It's Rebel News.
Yeah.
Oh, that's me.
That's you there. And that's related to Vicky.
Vicky's, yeah.
There's another person
similar.
that's been denied life-saving heart... Well, was
Isn't
denied
mad that that's
life-saving
still
heart
happening?
surgery. Yeah, it's crazy that it's still happening. And the reason I bring this up is today, speaking of Senator Babette, he introduced a bill in the parliament to not give these companies indemnity. So companies like Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca... they have indemnity.
Why do they need indemnity?
They're not responsible for this suffering that people are having. I know this is not related to the stories of the lung transplant, but just in general with all the devastation we're seeing with people injured.
No, we're not talking about nothing. Nothing is happening.
No, look, I think it's okay to say that we know that there's people in Australia.
No. It doesn't. You know what? It doesn't matter if listen, YouTube, Google, Facebook. We're not saying anyone's injured. Everybody's fine. And
no one got injured.
No one got injured.
Everyone's fine. Everyone's good. We're just saying that if in the case one day, why do these companies need indemnity?
Yeah.
Why? If you believe so strongly that it's so safe and effective, like you've been telling us for 3 years, why do they need indemnity?
Yeah.
Well, I think we all know the answer why.
Don't say it.
I'm going to say it, but like everybody at home understands the answer why.
Well, that's why I think this bill that Benji, if you bring this on the
Was
screen,
it good to come to a podcast where we ask you a question and tell you not to answer?
No, because like this bill will actually show. I mean, as much as Senator Babbitt's put this forward, I think it's going to have a really hard time passing in the Australian Parliament.
It will not pass.
Our politicians, even though taxpayers have to cough up the money to cover for these things that are happening to people in our country, it's very unlikely that politicians will get behind holding these companies responsible.
What was the number?
Themselves.
There was a number this week on how much Victoria has paid out through WorkSafe. I saw Rebel ran that earlier this week, but it's millions of dollars already.
Crazy.
That are being, and if you think about it, they were mandated, so you're forced to take it. Then on top of it, so the taxpayer had to. If you didn't want it, the taxpayer, we all had to fork out for this thing. And if you didn't want it, then you were penalised by not being able to work.
Yeah.
And if you took it because the government told you to, and somebody gets injured, the government's been paying out all this money, millions. So you're paying for every side of this. And the ones that should be at least held responsible if it goes bad, they get a free pass.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, same deal in every country. And obviously there were millions of people around the world that wanted to see the Pfizer contracts and filing freedom of information requests, and they all came back, completely blacked out. But coming back to the bill here from Senator Babette, no, it probably won't pass, but one thing it will achieve, which I think is critical, is it will single out those in Parliament who support justice and those who don't. So we should take note of those who support Ralph's bill, and we should make a mention of them. That's important as well.
Yeah, I think it's good to put them on the line, put this question to them and see how they answer. And I already kind of feel like I know the conclusion, but yeah, like you said, we'll know the names at least on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got nothing against naming and shaming any person in public life whose decisions hurt the people of this country, and they're in public life and they're a target, and we need to just aim between the eyes, metaphorically speaking, and
totally
metaphorically speaking, and talk about it on the opposition podcast, because let's face it, John Pesutto is not talking about anybody who abused the rights of Australians during, say, the past 4 years.
John Pesutto is the biggest embarrassment to the Liberal Party.
You should invite him on.
We will.
I don't think he'll come on.
We'll invite him.
We'll invite him. I don't think he'll come on.
I
mean, this guy's a coward, in my opinion.
I think John Pesutto is the bravest face of Victoria. He'll come on.
Nah.
John, I believe in you.
No.
I don't think John really believes in himself.
No one believes in John.
Not even John.
Not even John. You can see he's got no conviction in anything he says.
One interesting thing I noticed about John, he was speaking to the media, and he literally stated about 3 or 4 times in one breath that he is the leader of the opposition. It's almost like he was trying to remind himself, like, now as the leader of the opposition and a leader and as the alternative premier, I've decided that da-da-da-da-da because I am the leader. And we're like, no, you're not. You're just a little man with a big ego who, likes to try and push whatever weight you've got around. And I don't think Victorians have much faith in him, let alone the, very rapidly dwindling membership base of the Victorian Liberal Party.
Yeah, I mean, this was probably the most successful week that they've had in Parliament, the opposition, since they've...
Because of the Com Games.
Because of the Com Games thing, and all the other senators, besides all the Labor senators, and members of Parliament stood up and said we want an inquiry.
Yeah.
Even the Greens, the Greens who
I don't know
are
what happened there.
owned by Daniel Andrews, in my opinion.
I think it was just. I think this one was one you couldn't stand.
You couldn't
against.
justify it.
You
right?
couldn't justify. The Greens could not. Although it hasn't stopped them before. It hasn't stopped them before when there were inquiries into. I remember recently, what was it? There was a few inquiries into money, to IBAC and things like that when people were asking for investigations, and the Greens,
Missing in action.
the Greens fought it. So on this one, it's very interesting. Maybe even the Greens have had enough. It's like the Greens are like just Trudeau's wife. They've done.
They're done.
They've walked out.
They want to end it. They want to end it.
I think that is a great analogy. Justin Trudeau and his wife is like Daniel Andrews and the Greens.
Finished.
Well, the relationship's been on the rocks for a long time.
All around the world.
They try to keep it sort of civil for the sake of keeping up appearances, but all things come to an end at one stage or another.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, look, we obviously see a lot of people jumping up and down about the Commonwealth Games. For me personally, I want to see COVID inquiries. I want to see people held responsible for decisions that were made that resulted in the destruction of innocent people's lives. And look, everyone loves the Commonwealth Games. If I'm going to speak personally, for me, it's like a non-issue. But that's just me personally.
Limerick's calling for a royal commission.
Good.
Do you support? I know there was a bit of stuff there.
I support the calling for a royal commission.
Do you support the Liberal Democrats nowadays?
Now
they're called the Libertarian
Party.
Yeah, that's good. Actually, I wanted them to change their name to that. I think it's a much better name.
It is a much better name.
Yeah, they're doing well in the United States. I support a lot of things that they do. There's probably some things we disagree on.
So this is going back to our first conversation. It's history.
Yeah, it's probably history. I'd say it's history. I
found all that.
I've got nothing bad to say about them.
I found the last 2 elections, all that toxicity, and I've learnt to stay out of all that. It was hard emotionally to watch it for, all these different groups that I like, all just going...
Well, not just political groups even, right? This kind of freedom movement, which you are very much were a part of or are a part of, Morgan, did fracture a lot. And I know a lot of people that watch our kind of shows and stuff are from
different groups
and different movements.
And they all have one thing in common.
The one thing in common for a while.
They hate me.
They hate Harvey. One thing in common, but that's
a given. Right?
There is this fracturing that's happened now, and people have lost their way. People are pointing fingers at each other. I'm sure I'm reading some comments here. Some people saying some nasty things about you. Doesn't matter. But I'm just saying.
Sorry, Morgan.
It
was me.
Join the crowd. You know what I mean? Like, you got to have thick skin in this space. So people are going to say nasty things.
What is the? And I think I heard.
I bet no one said something nasty. Rukshan just said that to it.
No, but I heard in a video you made recently. You're saying about how people are kind of going on to like Telegram and kind of going into this like dark place sometimes. Being black-pilled about certain issues, like just kind of giving up on things. How do people get out of it? Because like for myself and Avi and even you, we're always kind of in this space. We're always looking at these issues, and I feel like things are changing. We've got to keep moving with the issues that are going on around us. It is easy though to get fixated on one issue and just stay there and think that without a resolution for that issue, you can't move on. I think there is a thing where people are fixated on what happened during COVID, and a lot of people haven't moved on from that. Do you think people need to move on in a manner that doesn't forget what happened, but actually look at the issues in the future? Because I think there's more problems coming down the track that if we don't focus on those, there's other issues that are coming.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your sentiments. There's, a few parts to the statements that you've made. So, I suppose that a lot of there was a lot of infighting. It did become very toxic, and I'm gonna chalk that up to a lot of growing pains. A lot of people, getting involved in a space where they haven't necessarily been involved before, and it basically achieved no good for anyone anywhere. So, people who are players in this space are going to have options, either to sit down, point the finger at people, and say, "Well, you did this, and then I responded by doing that." And if those conversations need to be had with certain people, then I'll put it out there. If anyone wants to have a conversation like me, who's in that space, they've got my phone number, and I'm willing to sit down and talk with anyone. Right. So that being said, now the second part of that is that we don't have time to get too caught up on the past, because as I mentioned before, there's over 500,000 people that are voting for alternative parties of either a conservative, libertarian, or say freedom-based standpoint in this state. Okay, we're looking at nearly 15% of the primary vote, and that needs to be the motivating factor here to hopefully strike up new conversations. And obviously, I'm involved because I'm the president of a registered political party. So let me just put that out there as it is. Now, the second part of what you said, Rukshan.
But you're willing to talk, even because I know them, the Liberal Democrats during the last election. You weren't willing to talk to them at all. You'd be willing to talk to them now, moving forward.
So no, we spoke to everybody, but there was issues involving things like preference deals and stuff like that. But, and that was all very public at the time. So
I know, but there was different groups that were tackling the election, taking on the election in different ways. There was obviously your group that were calling it the what was it? There was a name that you had for it.
For what?
The ones not doing the preference deals with Glenn Drury. What was it called?
Ethical Bloc.
The Ethical Bloc.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the Ethical Bloc, and then there was a split, and it was war between them, even though so many of the policies and the ideas were the same. And it was hard to watch from the outside. Obviously, they chose to go down the route, and if you look at it now, you'd probably say they got in. So did anyone from the Ethical Bloc get in? Was One Nation part of the Ethical Bloc?
Yeah, One Nation. One Nation got Ricky elected. But here's the point, though. Here's the point. Glenn Drury is not required in Victoria. Okay, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'll tell you why he's not required. Because now that all the cards have fallen and we've calculated all the votes, what the primary would be if there was let's just call it something else. Let's just say a block of minor parties who all preference each other, or who preference each other on the group voting tickets, or are willing to have some other sort of formalised arrangement like that. You've got a quota in all of the 8 regions. All right. Aidens accurately predicted that if there was such a bloc, such an alliance, it would result in between 8 to 10 elections of candidates from these parties in the upper house. And I thought, okay, it's an interesting prediction. I went and calculated all of the stats after the election, and I'm like, well, this guy was very, very accurate in terms of what he predicted. So, yeah, you understand about Glenn Drury and how he operates. It's not needed.
Yeah,
no one needs to use him.
I get that, right?
Yeah.
But obviously, the Ethical Bloc chose to go one way, and then there was the group that you can argue they were just doing what they've done every election, and they've been successful a couple of times, and they chose to go down that route. Now, that's fine. Each can choose how to play this political game, which is what it is. It's whether you play within the game rules or you try to break it. The thing that I saw that was horrible is not that one chose to go this way or that way, is that then it was war across parties or groups that should have been aligned, at least politically. The ideologies mostly aligned, especially when it came to COVID. Are we protected from that happening again, from repeating?
Well, from my end, yeah, absolutely. We need a block of like-minded parties to sit down around a table and to just honestly put an agreement together.
But that's what if they chose to do the same thing, to go with Glenn Drury? Would there be a repeat of that?
That would be such a bad thing to do, given that we have all the facts, all the evidence from the state election. We know exactly how people are voting, where they're voting, and we know what the possibilities are for a favourable outcome. So
But they would argue.
Let me finish this point. So for, say, a Conservative Party or something similar to want to go and pay, $55,000 to get elected into Parliament, which ultimately comes from the taxpayer because it comes from the expenditure at the electorate office, and to swap preferences with, the left or, the Animal Justice Party or a party like that, given the fact that there is no need to do that for anyone in one of these small parties to get elected, it just makes no sense. There's no rationale to do that unless there is some sort of multi-year contract involved between certain parties that we don't know about. All right, unless there's something like that.
Yeah, and I take on board everything you're saying. My question is, even considering that and believing that, because they would probably argue, well, hold on, we've run, I don't know how many elections has Lib Dems succeeded? It was more than two, at least two.
Yeah, at least
two in Victoria.
Is it just the last two?
Yeah.
Before that, they never had a seat?
No, not representation in Victoria.
Yeah.
So the last two, they used Drury, and they've been successful on both occasions. So they would argue, well, we've got a system that works. Why fix something that's, unless it's broken? For them, it's working. So
It's not working for the Victorian public, though. If your election depends on the election of your ideological opposite on the other side of the state, then I say that's not working, especially when we now know. Now is a different time. You got pre-COVID, you got post-COVID. We've got the data now. We know that Victorians protested in the streets in the hundreds of thousands, and that was reflected in how they voted. And that's what blocks need to be formed on moving forward.
So again, I take on board everything you're saying. I haven't analysed the data. I wouldn't even know how to analyse that data. I'm asking if they choose, with all that information, still to go down the route they go, and you guys have your ethical block, would we see a repeat of that war, or would it be, okay, that's the way they're choosing to do it, this is the way we think is the ethical way to do it, but it's not a reason to go to war with them, we're just doing what we think is more, again, ethical.
I don't want to go to war with anyone, so yeah, I'm not interested in that sort of stuff. If that's to answer your question. All we can do is be as ethical as we can, and now we have new data to work with post-COVID, and try and
sell
work
that
out
to them
try and sell that to people that we deal with, and also keep in mind how this new data, how it can be calculated and interpreted ahead of the next election to provide the best result. And when I say best result, I mean we need people who aren't going to just trample over the public on a whim.
100%.
Yeah. So that's where I'm coming from, and even if other people out there are doing what I consider to be the wrong thing, and pulling the wool over the eyes of the public, my commitment moving forward with my team will be as ethical as possible and transparent the whole way. So I don't like what happened either. Trust me, when you're in the middle of something like that, it's not fun. You said, you felt sick. Believe me, being in that zone, it was very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah,
and I don't wish that on anyone. Yeah.
Listen, through it, I interviewed you guys, and then I actually called Drury. I was and then I realized, stepping back, going, I feel like the focus of Rebel News during this election, I don't want it to be on this whole thing that's only going to make both sides seem like it's either petty or it's very hard to explain, when I think really I wanted to give, because I have limited time in my work at Rebel, I wanted to just give every single candidate I could possibly fit in that stands for things that, stands for the right, stands for freedom, stands for personal freedom. That I just want to give as many of them as possible,
and that's the right
a platform,
and that's the right thing to do. And I mean, honestly, I think Glenn Drury needs to just stay in New South Wales on his yacht, because he comes down, he's looking for $55,000 paydays,
what's his name's videos?
He's
very
pretty
smart.
Damning. He's very
Heston Russell.
Glenn Drury he's a master salesman, and he knows exactly how to capture candidates' self-interests and to sell them a product for them to consume.
The whole
And
thing's dodgy.
he's very good at presenting the message. And, it's your... your position in life is to be in the upper house. Now, this person is your enemy. Now, this person's not your friend, but you can align yourself with this person to take on a greater enemy. And then you've got a candidate who's just dreaming about walking down the halls of Parliament. It's like, tell me more.
Yeah.
And all I need to do is pay you $1,000 a week from my electorate office, and I can get elected to the upper house. I don't have to campaign. I can get 0.8% of the vote, and I'll have to sacrifice $1,000 that's not even from my salary, but from the taxpayer. Sign me up. Sign me up. And so we came out and we said, no, look, this needs to stop. We took the stand that we did. We understand that there was, a lot of very, very uncomfortable situations. I don't want the uncomfortableness to return. I don't want the fighting to return. And anyone out there, who's in this space, they've got my phone number. They can call me anytime if they want to meet behind closed doors and talk about it.
I think that's
I'm
fair
putting that
enough.
on the table.
I think because it's not about Glenn Drury. I think what Glenn Drury does is quite. I don't really like it. I haven't liked it for years. Heston Russell's expose, the secret.
That's what we call exposure.
The secret
That was
recordings
insane.
was insane.
Glenn Drury literally admitted, he said something to the effect of, now, I need to deliver a crossbench that the Daniel Andrews government can work with. Those
mad.
were his words.
It was.
So is Glenn Drury working for Dan Andrews or Labor?
And you know what
That's
was-
a question. Not saying he is, just saying is he?
I think he's working for himself, but I think he's working for himself. I think it's all self-interest. I think he doesn't want Daniel Andrews to cancel the system that allows him to operate. So he wants Dan Andrews.
It's all self-interest.
It's complete self-interest with Glenn Drury. And what was interesting, because when I made the phone call to him after I'd interviewed you guys about that story, is it contradicted some of the things that was caught on camera that he was secretly saying to Heston Russell. And I was like, oh. But again, put that all to the side, because this is not, for me, it's not really about Glenn Drury. That's a system that I think needs to be taken seriously, a real look at, and because it seems to only be really benefiting the Andrews government.
Group voting tickets
But while it
problematic.
exists, I think that if one freedom-oriented party chooses to use that system that's there and another one doesn't, I don't think that should be the thing that divides and conquers, because that's what I feel it just seems like happened.
Okay, let me ask you another question. In a perfect world, I agree with you. But let's just say that you're great at math, and not that you are, but let's just pretend that you are.
That's
and you,
I identify as a
identify
mathematician.
as a mathematician.
That's good enough.
Let's just say that you look at the statistics from the last election, and not much has changed in terms of policy over the past 4 years, and you make a prediction that more or less the public's going to vote relatively the same way. And you come to the realization that there is a party out there whereby they are likely to, swap preferences with a candidate who could be damaging to the Victorian public in order for them to seek re-election or election. And you're sitting there in your chair, you've got a voice, you've got this information right in front of you, and you think to yourself, well, probably the general public would like to know that, if they live in the Western or Eastern or Northern region or wherever, if they vote for, Joe Blow, actually they get Sandra, what's her name? And, I guess that's to me, that's a matter of being transparent and speaking in a manner that's very matter of fact. And I don't necessarily see that as provoking a fight, getting into a fight, rather commenting on a factual situation.
There's a way to do it, though. That's true. But I think the way Heston Russell did it was
well, that's great, because
perfectly
he just
executed, but it was a
let
bit
him
late.
hang himself.
What?
Well,
he just let him hang himself.
I know, but I wish Heston had dropped that a little earlier, because it seemed the
It was quite
time
late in the
it was
game.
too late. I feel like it was already once pre-polling was open, and
Was it?
But
Yeah.
if you ask me, guys, all of this conversation, it's too late now anyway. The world is about to end, because I want to go to the next topic.
climate change.
Yeah, because we're
boiling.
literally
Global boiling.
This is what we're talking about.
We're literally boiling. If you don't know at home, we're literally boiling. So I'm just going to play this compilation video from the Australian Parliament after the UN Secretary General said that we are now in the era of global boiling. So it's no longer global warming. It is now global boiling. So let's just have a look at Australian Parliament and how our politicians reacted, and I just want to get some of your thoughts on this. Ben, you've switched to the screen.
The planet is literally cooking.
The era of global warming has ended. The era of global boiling has arrived.
We have moved from the era of global warming to the era
The era of global boiling.
of global boiling.
The era of global warming has ended, and the era of global boiling has arrived.
As the UN Secretary General says, we have entered the era of global boiling.
Our environment is facing collapse. Our planet is choking.
The era of global boiling has arrived.
Death, disease, displacement, starvation, people dying of thirst, arable farming lands turning into desert, and most likely billions of people dead by the end of this century.
The UN Secretary General has warned that we've entered an era of global boiling.
The era of global boiling has arrived.
Can you get any clearer than that?
Just this week, the UN chief has told us that the era of global boiling has arrived.
Why is she not wearing a
The
mask?
era of global boiling has arrived.
That climate change is here.
Man, these people are giving me a headache.
It's just the beginning.
Many people are
ridiculous.
going to have to die.
We have now entered the era of global boiling.
The era of global boiling has arrived.
The era of global warming has ended,
The era of global boiling has arrived.
and the era of global boiling has arrived.
The air is unbreathable.
Air is unbreathable.
The heat is unbearable.
The heat is unbearable.
Level of fossil fuel profits and climate inaction is unacceptable.
And the level of fossil
I like
fuel
the sound
profit
effect
and
of the
climate
boiling in the
inaction
background.
is unacceptable.
There you go.
Can you be honest?
Yeah.
Because boiling.
just
Do
like
you?
left that hanging
Because
for a
you've
bit.
just subscribed to X.
Yeah.
What is that? Ads.
X is running ads now.
Yeah. So you're hoping because that's your Twitter, yeah.
that was my Twitter, yes.
So what you-
follow me on X, guys.
But you do realize, brother, that if you play it to a live stream across all platforms,
Yeah.
it doesn't get the interaction from the.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I don't care about the interaction.
Oh, you want everyone to go to Twitter?
Twitter
so that,
and follow me at the real Rukshan
Real
on
Rukshan.
X. On X, not
are you
Twitter
on
anymore.
Twitter? Have you signed up to the monetization?
No, I've got no idea about any of that.
Mate.
What's going on?
Mate. But look, the reason I brought up that video was just to show
It
you-
doesn't matter. You're not going to get paid. We're going to boil before then.
we're all going to boil. And the capture of the Australian Parliament, I mean, you just have this guy, every year he touts the same thing. He says the same kind of message, the world is ending. This year he's got this new line, global boiling. A couple of days later, I don't think any of these politicians have actually looked into whatever he's talking about. And they've just come out almost verbatim and said, this is what this guy said, we're all going to die.
They even stuttered at the same
They even started at
word.
the same time. Our parliament, I mean, a lot of people say it's a conspiracy and so forth when we talk about how much control and influence the World Economic Forum has or the United Nations has. But just in that video, it demonstrates just how quickly these messages from these global bodies filter down into Australia. And when we're looking at something like the WHO pandemic treaty that we might be signatories to, isn't it almost like the UN is a member of our parliament? Like they are literally setting the agenda?
Yeah, well, I mean, I see the UN and the World Economic Forum as another layer of government, really, on a global scale. World Economic Forum, we're looking at a global policy think tank, effectively, where policy is created, photocopied, adopted by member states, and introduced as bills in Parliament at a state, territory, and federal level. So I think that you're right about that, and the proof is in the pudding. This video is a great little example, but of course we can look at the state of emergency legislation or the pandemic management bill and see the similarities in other bills that have been introduced throughout, say World Health Organization member states, and one really has to draw the parallels with the sort of harmonization of policy all around the world. So yeah, it's not a conspiracy. It's happening.
Because I feel like this push, particularly around this net zero and the climate thing, it's really ramping up now.
Oh, yeah.
And the way it's been tied to every facet of our lives Victoria had the gas ban. Again, net zero considerations, they're saying.
Even though it makes 0 sense.
It makes 0 sense.
We're going to burn, what is it, brown coal instead? Is it brown coal or black coal here? What do we burn?
I don't know.
We've got the good coal.
The good coal.
The good coal, but it's
coal.
gas is better than the good coal.
Yeah. And they don't want to even consider any nuclear options in our country, even though we have the capacity to do all this stuff, right?
And we store Francis waste.
Yeah, and with all of that in front of mind, the fact that particularly these Green politicians, are pushing this agenda, and they're being very successful, even with a small group of them. They seem to be pushing Labor down this path as well.
What do you mean Labor? They're pushing freaking Liberal.
Even the Liberals, yeah, they're giving like a light, the light version of all of this as well. How do we, as a general public, fight back against this type of messaging? Because I think a lot of people, until they see these type of videos and what goes on in Parliament, they don't realize that this is the way it's been talked about and set up. This is not shown every day, but this is what they use. This is the legitimacy that they give themselves by saying the UN said this, so therefore we must do X in Australia. We must cut off gas in Australia. How do we get the message across to the public that this is actually what our elected officials are doing every day in Parliament? They're taking these orders from the UN and pushing these kind of things through that affect our lives, that affect our businesses.
I think that you're doing exactly the right thing by making videos that are palatable to the general public, that are engaging, consuming, a little bit humorous, right? People enjoy watching these videos, and I think we need more of your work or people creating, this type of content, because ultimately it's a form of entertainment. But as we know, entertainment shapes culture and thinking. Just look at music and movies, and of course, content creators have become massive, especially over the past 10 years. But you're right; it's a formidable beast. We've seen these climate independents elected. Sure, they had the backing of Climate 300 and Simon Holmes-A-Court, but they also had 20, 30 years of what shall we call it? Climate change, hysteria. Leading up to their campaign. It's just like a no-brainer to get these people elected. So I actually think that the true answer is fighting back culturally. I think through the arts.
Yeah.
I think we need.
So it is a bit of a culture war. I know people hate that word, but
no, it is.
I think it is a culture war, isn't it?
You're a culture warrior.
I'm happy to say that I'm a part of the culture war, because I feel like if we don't engage in this, what is going on right now, we're going to be on the back foot in terms of conservatives or people who are more libertarian. If they don't engage in these type of debates and actually show these people up, they're just going to ram stuff through.
Yeah, I think it's all culture. You're right. I think it's commentary, news commentary, movies, humor. For instance, my friend Gabriel Rossi, he's performing at MCJ 200 tomorrow. He's been a comedian since the 90s here in Melbourne. He's making short videos online, just taking the absolute piss out of wokeness and everything that's attached to it. And he's having a lot of success, and it's influencing people because his videos are funny, and he's showing the ridiculousness in so much of what we're faced with. So, yeah, I'd say fight back on all cultural fronts, especially the arts.
And just to finish up, Morgan, what do you reckon about this misinformation, disinformation bill? It kind of leads into everything that we've been talking about today, particularly around fighting this culture war. Issues like climate change, particularly, these are things that they're going to want to clamp down on in terms of...
It goes exactly to your point, I think, because he's right. The arts is where you got to fight, and that's why that content is important and it is good, and you're saying your mate, but that's why they want to target it, because they know how important it is in the fight back.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Avi, and I think you've hit the nail on the head with that one. We need to kill the bill, and Australians need to unite against this bill. But it's going to take a big effort. It's going to need a lot of people raising alarm bells. I'd like to tell everyone at home that you can go and send a letter to your MP, and the bill will be killed. But but maybe on the other hand, all right, I don't mean to be all pessimistic, but I think a lot of the time in life things need to get worse before they get better. Sometimes people actually need their rights to be taken away before they realize how great it was to have rights. People need to feel what it's like to have their freedom, infringed upon before they want to step up and fight for their freedom. So I would like to see a huge collective pushback against this bill, clearly. But, if not, then...
Is it something that's worth hitting the streets over?
100%.
In terms of protest? It's like civil protest? I think it kind of rises to that level, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I remember during the COVID times and all those protests, but I feel like this disinformation bill, I don't think people understand if this goes through, this affects almost every type of debate that we have.
Yeah.
It cuts into everything.
The Ministry of Truth.
The Ministry of Truth has complete control then over narratives and in terms of setting public debate. And, it just impacts everything, right? If this is not worth protesting about and stopping, I think we've kind of failed as a nation just to protect our rights against these things.
So we need a protest organizer to get something happening. Who should that be?
What are you? What's his what's his title? Freedom Party.
Freedom,
leader.
If not the Freedom Party, who?
Freedom slash.
This should be the mandate of the Freedom Party.
We followed Nick Patterson and their crew this week.
Okay.
Which we've got a story coming out where they're literally marching the streets and handing out flyers trying to raise awareness around the issue, which I found quite good. But yeah, you're going to need a lot more than that. I think it will pass. Look at the government. Yeah. Look at where we are right now.
It's not looking good. It's not looking good.
We're going to be banned. You and me are going to have more free. Our podcast is going to have more freedom in China
That's
than
right.
it will here.
They're attacking us. They're attacking independent creators. They're attacking independent media, alternative media. They're attacking these platforms like Rumble and so forth. That's what it's all about. 100%. They want complete control.
Thought control.
Over these platforms and over the creators by handicapping them. Because it doesn't target the media. Mainstream media is not targeted by this bill.
No.
Politicians aren't targeted by this bill. Councillors aren't targeted by this bill. The only people they target is Morgan, Avi, and Rukshan, the people of colour.
The real trouble.
What were the exemptions? Was it mainstream media? Or?
Mainstream media is exempt.
No, does it say mainstream media?
Yeah, mainstream professional media.
Because I would challenge it in court.
You'd go to court.
I would go court over that. Because one of the things that's interesting in all my court battles with them is that they've never made the argument that we're not journalists and we're not a legitimate media company. Because they can't, in front of the law, they can't actually argue that. And they know we'll win that argument. That's how they've won in Canada. Because as soon as you make that argument, you go to a judge, well, define a media company, define a journalist. And if you're going to say it has to do with somebody's accreditation as a qualification, well, you're going to actually have to strike out a lot of what you call award-winning journalists have just as many qualifications as I do. So a media company is a structure, and obviously Rebel News is a media company that's registered, and then you have journalists that are paid under it. So and that's what you could. So if that's the wording, if it has to be a registered media company, and they try to shut us down, would go straight to court. But I just think that this is outrageous, because why can't the individual citizen journalist, everyone with a phone, why should they be held to a higher standard?
I mean, it's the ultimate,
than the media and politicians.
Yeah, it's the ultimate sign of a free society, I believe, in my mind, in what I believe is that where independent citizen journalists are protected at the highest before mainstream media is protected.
They should have more regulation.
If you can't protect the individual citizen journalist from saying what they want to say, our founding documents, our constitutions, none of that means any crap. If you're protecting these mainstream institutions that weren't even a part of the establishment of our countries and our nations, they don't even rise to that level. They're corporations that have come later on and created these codes of ethics and all this kind of stuff that they go by, which they don't really follow anyway. We saw during COVID. They're not doing any of these things. The main vital protection in our countries should be for the individual and individual citizen journalists and independent media and politicians and political communication. But those are the things which they're attacking. And it's not being attacked by the media, it's being attacked by the people we put in Parliament to represent us. They're putting the bill together to actually take that away from the people. It's like crazy stuff when you actually think about what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking. And for everybody listening at home, listen to Rukshan. I mean, the way that you broke that down describes very accurately how Australians have behaved electorally for, the past few decades at least, really not paying much attention, just walking into the polling booths and voting for either the red team or the blue team, only to have these people elected who promptly take measures to take our rights away. And is that a real democracy? I mean, did anybody vote to have our rights taken away? They just voted for a brand name effectively. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully things don't need to get too much worse before they can get better. But, sometimes in life things need to hit rock bottom before the little man, steps up and the people start rising up en masse. And if that's what happens in this country, then, I'm all for it. And hopefully I'll see you boys out there, Like, I know that you'll be out there capturing the action. So are you. I'll probably be in more of a protest demonstrator capacity. That's sort of how I like to get down in these events. And, if that's what happens, then, you know what? Life is beautiful and life wasn't meant to be easy. And if there's nothing to fight for, if you don't experience any challenges in life, then you're missing out. I think that fulfillment in life really comes from taking on a formidable foe, not giving up the fight, staying true to your beliefs, no matter even when things seem unbeatable. You just keep going. So a bit of Morgan motivation for you.
That was motivating. He was on a roll there. So before we end tonight, was there any comments you wanted to run through?
I'll have a look through the comments. But why don't you, Morgan, tell us a little bit about your show and what's happening
tomorrow night? Yes, tell us about that at the end before we close off here. And he's looking for the comments. He's got to translate it from English to Sri Lankan to English.
Yeah, I mean, I nearly forgot about that. So tomorrow night, MCJReport 200. Live audience, celebrate my 200th episode.
Where can people get tickets if they want to come?
So head on over to MCJReport.com, click on the banner. I think there's, there might be like 5 or 10 tickets remaining. It's pretty much a sold out house.
Who's coming?
The people who the general public have grown to know and love.
So Rukshan's not coming?
Well, he's coming, but I had to scrap you because I was getting too many complaints. Now we got Avi, Rukshan, we got Senator Babbitt, we got Craig Kelly. We got Gabrielle Rossi, we've got Aiden McClendon, we've got Ivan Beecroft who will be on the guitar, we've got Leonie Blackwell, Greg Cheeseman running for office, we've got Harrison Anthony Lev, we've got Fanos, the great Fanos. So many people love Fanos. He motivated us so much, especially in 2020. And I think that's about it. We have the great Brian Heath, the great Pastor Brian Heath, father to Renee Heath. Brian's a great friend of mine, and he's travelled all around the world on humanitarian causes, spreading the word of God. A very insightful man, like him a lot. And so it should be a big night. It'll be
Scotch
over.
Is there a bar?
There's
there?
a bar, yeah, yeah.
Rukshan,
there's going to be drinking.
Can you take
it's going to be wild. Night? It's going to be wild. Like it's going to be a packed house.
And can you be our designated driver?
And you guys are speaking,
dude. It's either
sort
you
of
come.
This is your life sort of thing, like.
What is
like
that?
Who was the real Avi Yemini?
That's tomorrow night.
Yeah, that's right.
We've got that.
Who was the real Rukshan?
Morgan, you're meant to help me out here. I'm trying to get a designated driver to take me there because there's a bar. And, there's one of two options. He can either, as a friend, come pick me up and take me, or I can order an Uber and he'll come pick me up and take me.
Sorry, what?
I might come in my Uber and pick you up.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
I know that's what you wanted me to say.
Any comments worth reading?
I'm just having trouble finding the comments. I think a lot of people didn't put the Q at the start. The only comment that I have, Morgan, is some people were saying, let me just pull it up. 1 second, Benji. Wondering if there's any chance of not making voting compulsory in Australia. What do you think about that, Morgan?
I love it.
Yeah, I
love it.
Yeah, do you think compulsory voting is an issue? I mean, it sounds crazy, but
man, when I look at our members with Freedom Party of Victoria, we had about 1,000 volunteers across the state. They were passionate. They were willing to get out, sacrifice their time. Voting was just a given that they would leave their house and do it. Very grateful. God bless each and every one of them. So you take out compulsory voting, you will decimate the primary vote of Labor and Liberal, and parties like My Little Party, Freedom Party of Victoria, and some similar ones will rise up so drastically in primary vote.
That's why we would
dominate. We would wipe out the system. John Pursuto would be applying for Centrelink or trying to get a job at Coles, just like so many of his colleagues. It'd be great. So Get rid of.
There's nothing
get
wrong
rid of
with working
compulsory.
at Coles.
There's nothing wrong if
I just wouldn't
you're,
shop at the one John
if you're a
Piscido's
student and you're trying to
working
like make your way in life. But the point I'm trying to make is that when these MPs leave office, they've got no practical skills that can be applied to the real world. So get rid of the compulsory voting. The primary vote will shoot up for like the parties that have people that actually care, and the whole country will be transformed.
Yeah.
But it'll never happen for that reason.
I have a question from a hater that's been putting a few hate comments, but I'll put this to you, Morgan. Dear Morgan, there is little public info about you apart from mainstream media reports about you as a violent anti-vaxxer and alt-right blogger. I mean, these labels that are put
Aziz
on
Khan.
from Aziz Khan, these labels that are put on, Morgan, on Avi, on myself sometimes.
I suspect Aziz Khan doesn't like Morgan's support of the only Jewish state.
Alt-right blogger, I mean, I wouldn't... No, that's definitely like a miscategorization of, what I do and how I run my podcast. But the comments this person is making is dug up from some Herald Sun article, probably from like 2022 or 2021.
Because he did have a bit of, focus on you from the media during that time.
Yeah, they said all sorts of things.
Yeah, all sorts of things said about you.
Yeah, I mean, I have been politically interested and working my way into becoming engaged in this space for the better part of 10 years, but really I just came to be, more well-known during COVID. So when I did start to get media write-ups, the first two things I was labelled as was, anti-vaxxer and conspiracy theorist. And then somewhere along the way, they just threw the alt-right thing in there as well. So, that's what the media does. They try to trash you by labelling you and then hope that the general public will not do any of their own thinking or ask any of their own questions and label you the same. And, that unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there, they just... they drink the Kool-Aid. They don't really think for themselves. And, there's people out there who think that you're some sort of like hyper racist and will see you in the street and they want to, Rukshan, I'm going to fight with you because you're
I've been
this
told
and
that
that.
I'm a white supremacist and leader of like a white supremacist movement in Australia. I mean, it's just crazy stuff.
So this is basically like a KKK.
It's it's
sort of meeting.
Crazy stuff. Yeah. And I see it firsthand now, like when I see the comments about you guys and other people. I know just generally anyone, doesn't matter who it is, they will say alt-right, far-right, Nazi. They love to throw in that word now. These things have no meaning anymore.
Yes, it's terrible, and like these are like really serious. Once upon a time, they were really serious accusations. To infer that somebody holds those particular types of views, and now it's just all over the place. And I mean, just. You, Avi, you especially have received all sorts of...
I suspect we need to find... Aziz, there's not much known about you. Can you please tell us more about Aziz? Because I have my suspicions about you.
There's a really famous YouTuber, sort of bodybuilder guy called Aziz, like in the 2000s. He was like the first like legitimately well-known YouTube guy, and he sadly passed away, I think, from like steroids or drug abuse or something.
Oh, I saw something like that, yeah.
Oh, just now.
This was years ago.
Okay.
That was a random fact that Morgan's just thrown in. Have we got any other comments?
Not that random. They're both called Aziz, so like Aziz, you don't exactly hear Aziz.
So the only Aziz we know is not a good guy. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, he was a good guy. He was just young. I mean, he made motivational videos. I think he took a lot of steroids, and unfortunately, his developing heart just couldn't take it, and he passed away.
There's lots of different comments. Thank you everyone for the comments tonight. Sorry we didn't get to all your questions. I think we just need to make the process clear. I think people are just having a chat amongst themselves. And
who are they talking about? You?
No, there's just a few trolls in there.
There's my man Adrian Irvine. What's going on, Adrian? He's a good mate of mine.
Meet and greet.
Helped me out today with the cherry picker. Thank you, Adrian.
There we go.
But yeah, look, I think we should wrap it up, right?
Well, thank you, Morgan, for coming on tonight, and good luck tomorrow. We look forward to getting pissed after.
It's going to be wild. It's going to be a wild night. So,
but we'll be there. I'm excited to see a successful event, to be a part of it, and thanks for being here tonight. And hope to see some of you there tomorrow.
Yep. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you, Avi, and to all of you watching at home, watching in Australia, watching around the world. Thank you for joining in to the Opposition Podcast. You can find our shows on the opposition.show. If you go to that link now, you will see also links to other platforms where you can find our podcast. So I think on Spotify, I've been told.
We're everywhere now.
Apple Podcasts, I believe, Google Podcasts, everywhere. Just look up the Opposition Podcast, put Avi and Rukshan's name. It's not the controlled Opposition Podcast as it's being
We're not being paid enough yet for that.
Yeah, it might become
the opposition.
No, the controlled opposition podcast.
When our puppet master comes. On that
That's
note,
right.
until next week at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Time, Yalla Habibi.
See you guys.